This video is brought to you by Roll for Combat, an official Paizo actual play podcast. Visit rollforcombat.com today to listen to Agents of Edgewatch and join Basil, Dougie, Gomez, and Lomang as they protect and serve the citizens of Absalom from a mysterious and diabolical plot. Welcome to Battle Breakdown by How It's Played, the series that examines famous scenes from movies and television through the lens of a role-playing game and illustrates how those events might play out at the game table. In this edition, we'll be looking at an encounter from 2001's The Fellowship of the Ring as if it was an encounter in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Specifically, we'll be using this as an example of a monster using their grab ability. In this scene, the Fellowship has opened the gates to the mines of Moria and discovered that the stronghold has been decimated by the armies of Sauron. After a brief moment of shock at this discovery, the four hobbits begin backing out of the mine's entrance and are attacked by a monster referred to in the books as the Watcher in the Water, which, for our purposes, has the following stats. When the GM calls for initiatives to be rolled, all members of the Fellowship roll Perception, and the Watcher rolls Stealth for its initiative. It has a stealth bonus of plus 17, and GM Tolkien decides to grant an additional plus 4 due to the dark and murky state of the water it's hiding in, giving the Watcher a total stealth bonus of plus 21. Incidentally, none of the members of the Fellowship notice the Watcher hiding in the water during their approach to the mine because none of their perception rolls for the Seek action beat the Watcher's stealth DC of 31. The Watcher wins initiative, and with its first action, it makes a melee arm attack against Frodo. This hits and deals 2d8 plus 9 bludgeoning damage. The damage entry for this attack also says plus knockdown and improved grab, which means on a hit, the Watcher can grab the victim as a free action. This is only possible because it has improved grab, and because of this, Frodo is now suffering the flat-footed and immobilized conditions, and he must also pass a DC 5 flat check to use any actions with the Manipulate trait. And since the attack was a success and has knockdown listed in its damage entry too, the Watcher is able to use its second action to impose the prone condition on Frodo, and then spends its third action to drag the Hobbit one square closer. GM Tolkien treats this the same as dragging an object, one action to drag one square, and thanks to the Watcher having a strength modifier of plus 6 and Frodo being a small-sized creature, he doesn't really worry about bulk limitations and just keeps the game moving. Now the Fellowship takes their turns in a flurry of activity. Merry and Pippin are next and perform the same actions. They both stride to Frodo first and then use their second actions to prepare to aid. The aid basic action allows you to spend an action on your turn to prepare to give aid later to another character during their turn, but you must spend your reaction at that time to do so. Now on Frodo's turn, Frodo spends his first action to try and escape from the Watcher's grab. This calls for his choice of rolling acrobatics, athletics, or an unarmed attack against the Watcher's athletics DC. The Watcher has an athletics skill bonus of plus 20, which means his athletics DC is 30. Frodo decides to use acrobatics, and before he rolls the die, Merry and Pippin both announce that they're using their reactions to aid Frodo. They're able to do this because each of them spent an action during their turn to prepare to aid. GM Tolkien decides they will need to roll athletics checks for this to represent them grabbing hold of Frodo and trying to pull him out of the Watcher's grasp. The DC for their checks is 20, and both Merry and Pippin succeed. But this does not mean they succeed in pulling him free. What this means is they grant a plus 1 circumstance bonus to Frodo's escape check. Not plus 2 because this is a typed bonus and typed bonuses do not stack. Frodo has an acrobatic skill of plus 10, plus 1 more from his friend's aid makes this a total check of 1d20 plus 11 versus DC 30. Meaning Frodo needs to roll a 19 or 20 on the die to break free from the Watcher's grab. Frodo rolls a 14 for a total of 25 and fails this check. He doesn't break free from the grab, but he can try again. With his second action, he attempts to escape again, but this time without the plus 1 from Merry and Pippin's aid, and also suffers a negative 5 multiple attack penalty. Remember, even though Frodo is using the acrobatic skill here, the escape action has the attack trait. Therefore, each use of escape counts towards and is affected by the multiple attack penalty. He rolls 1d20 plus 5 versus DC 30 and gets a 7 on the die for a total of 12. Since this is more than 10 lower than the DC, he critically fails the check, which means he cannot attempt to escape again until the next round. So, with his third action, Frodo complains to GM Tolkien that this encounter is not fair. Next in initiative is Sam. He starts his turn by calling for help. This is a free action, it doesn't cost him anything. Strider! He then strides to Frodo with his first action, and makes a strike at the tentacle grabbing Frodo with his second action. The Watcher in the water has a feature called Grasping Tentacles that says a creature can sever a tentacle with a target attack that hits AC 25 and deals at least 11 slashing damage. This doesn't deal any damage to the Watcher in the water itself, though it can no longer attack with a severed tentacle. Sam's attack hits, but fails to deliver 11 points of slashing damage, so with his third action he tries again. He makes another melee attack roll -5 due to the multiple attack penalty, rolls a hit and deals enough slashing damage to cut off the tentacle and free Frodo. Boromir, Gandalf, Gimli, Legolas, and Strider's turns are not shown in this clip, but consist of a mix of seek, recall knowledge, interact, and stride actions to assess the situation and rush to the Hobbit's aid. At the top of the second round, the Watcher uses Writhing Arms. This ability costs 2 actions and allows the Watcher to make up to 4 attacks with different arms, each at a different target. In this case, the Watcher targets each of the 4 hobbits. It hits all 4 hobbits, dealing 2d8 plus 9 bludgeoning damage to each of them, and the last line of the ability says, if the Watcher in the water subsequently uses the grab action, it can grab or knock down any number of creatures it hit with Writhing Arms. The Watcher does this with his third action and chooses to grab Frodo and knock down Merry, Pippin, and Sam. So, Frodo once again gains the grabbed condition and the others gain the prone condition. As we see in the clip, once Frodo is grabbed, the Watcher pulls him 3 squares and holds him high over the water. Frodo complains as a free action, saying it's not fair that he was singled out to be grabbed while the others were merely knocked down, and reminds GM Tolkien that there is nothing in Raw that says when a creature is grabbed by a large or huge sized monster that the monster can freely pull their grabbed target closer. In this case, the Watcher was not dragging Frodo as it had before, and the grab ability does not allow for this kind of forced movement by Raw. Now, GM Tolkien strongly believes that pulling Frodo a few squares closer and holding him over the water is exciting, cinematic, and will add tension to the scene. And he really doesn't care if Raw doesn't allow for it. He's the GM and he's empowered to do whatever he believes is appropriate to provide for a fun and exciting game. Now the rest of the Fellowship has arrived and it's Legolas's turn. He spends his first 2 actions to stride out of the mine, and with his third action he attempts to free Frodo as Sam had done before by attacking the tentacle that's holding him. He rolls a success for the attack and hits the tentacle, but unfortunately, the text for Grasping Tentacles says it takes 11 points of slashing damage to free a grabbed creature, and Legolas's bow deals piercing damage. So GM Tolkien says, sorry, it was a good idea, but piercing damage won't work for this. Strider and Boromir both spend their first actions to stride into the water, which counts as greater difficult terrain at this depth. Boromir then spends his second and third actions to make melee sword attacks against the Watcher. Both attacks hit and deal damage to the monster's hit points, and GM Tolkien describes this damage in the narrative as Boromir lopping off stray tentacles, just not the one that is holding Frodo. Then, on Strider's turn after he moves into the water, he makes 2 attacks against the tentacle that's holding Frodo captive. The first attack hits, but he rolls 1s for the damage and is not enough to cut through the tentacle, but with his third action, he attacks again, hits, rolls more than 11 points of slashing damage, and finally frees Frodo. And now in the third round of the encounter, the Fellowship wisely flees into the mine. It takes Strider and Boromir 2 stride actions to walk out of the greater difficult terrain imposed by the water, and their third actions to enter the mine, while Legolas is able to spend 1 action to attack the monster before he has to flee. he makes a ranged attack, rolls a natural 20, and gets to draw a card from the critical hit deck. His bow deals piercing damage, and the piercing effect on the card he drew is titled Eye Patch for You. This attack deals triple damage, and the Watcher in the water will be dazzled until healed. It's a solid hit, but not enough to put the monster down, so Legolas spends the rest of his actions to flee into the mine with the others, and on the Watcher's turn, it collapses the mine's doorway behind them. Now let's watch that encounter one more time.
Now get out of here! Get out! Spider! Get off him!
That's one way this could have gone, but there are others. Food for thought for everybody viewing. In my version of events, GM Tolkien hand-waved the usual restrictions of Raw and allowed the Watcher in the water to use the grab action to force movement upon Frodo. Would you have handled that situation any differently in your games? Leave your thoughts and reasoning in the comments. As a follow-up to this video, I will leave links to my full rule explanation videos on the grab action, stealth, and damage in the description, and please leave your suggestions for future battle breakdowns in the comments. And as always, I want to thank all of my patrons and everyone else who supports me by subscribing and liking these videos. Until next time, take care and happy gaming.